And in the 1970s, the scientists at what was then DFO, or what is now DFO, decided that Flora Bank was critical habitat for fish for the entire system of salmon that live in the entire Skeena watershed, and that this was not a good place to have an industrial development. So now, 40 years later, what do we have? We have one of the LNG plants deciding that this is where they were going to be located. So once again, Honorable Speaker, people come forward and say, look, the risk to the environment, the risk to salmon, and what that would do to not just the environment, what it would do to the economy of the Northwest, what it would do to the ecosystem, what it would do to the cultural values of First Nations people who've lived there long before Europeans ever arrived. This doesn't make sense. It's not a good place for an LNG plant. And Honorable Speaker, once again, the government comes forward and says, oh, you know, you're just against jobs. No, Honorable Speaker, none of us in this House, I've never met a politician who is against jobs. Who actually, as a politically elected official, would want to be against jobs? I mean, that would simply be stupid. You'd want to have your citizens have jobs. At the same time, as people who are elected, we are also elected and have a responsibility to make sure that there's something for the next generation and the generation after that, Honourable Speaker. So once again, we get tied into a debate. And what does the Premier, and this is an important thing, Honourable Speaker, whether you like the Premier or don't like the Premier, whether you agree with the Premier or don't agree with the Premier, the fact is the Premier of this province represents us all. Okay? And for her to stand up and say to those in the Northwest, including hereditary chiefs, scientists, community activists, to call them a ragtag bag of people simply because they don't agree with one particular project that she has been promoting for the last 3 years. Now, if they had been a First Nations, say, for example, in my neck of the woods, who have been very supportive of LNG plants in a place where you don't have the risk to wild salmon, then, of course, they're heroes, and then she takes them to conferences after conferences and trots them out and says, look, here we've got First Nation support on this industry. If the local First Nations who actually have the rights to Lelu Island saying, wait a second here, we have serious problems with this project, then the least she can do is be respectful and not be demeaning and refer to them as ragtag. Honourable Speaker, while I was there, we heard from scientists who have specifically been working on Flora Bank. Okay? And here's one of the interesting things. They have done genetic testing of all the juvenile salmon in Flora Bank, Honourable Speaker, and every single run of salmon right up the Skeena watershed reside in that eelgrass bed. So what we're talking about here is putting at risk the entire salmon ecosystem of the Skeena watershed at risk so that we can have some jobs in an LNG plant, Honourable Speaker. That is what we are putting at risk. You know, it's no doubt that people get frustrated and don't have confidence in how we handle this industrial development and protecting our environment when we have to deal with things like this.